Hey guys, so today we're going to do a video replacing our rubber mounts on our transmission cross member. And so this is going to be for the early 901, 902 setup, 911 and 912 I believe on the early transmissions. The later transmissions actually had a mount that would install from the bottom side, looked exactly like the engine mounts. So that's a little bit easier to switch out. So these ones are a little bit more of a challenge. They have a couple of options here to make this work. Porsche Classic makes a complete replacement cross member with the mounts installed. Pretty expensive route to go if you just need the bushings and the sleeve in here. If your cross member is in really good shape, you just want to replace the rubbers, this is going to be helpful for you. So I was able to source our mounts from Buttys Bits out of the UK, and seems to be a real nice quality rubber and inner sleeve there. Able to put that together just by pressing in by hand the rubber mount, and then coming up with kind of a screw together contraption to pull our inner sleeve in there. So it's really not too difficult to do. A little bit of a wrestling match getting the old one out of there. You can see here this one's almost vulcanized in here. It's been in there so long and it's really hard and starting to crack. So just take a look and see how to get that out of there, and then put this together step by step. Okay, so the first thing we need to get out of there is going to be our inner sleeve here, and one of the problems with that is it's going to be really stuck to the old rubber and dried out on the inside. So my first thoughts were to take a tapered bit and just drill through it and maybe relieve it to this point, have the top fall off, and then push it through. But that didn't exactly work out the way I had hoped. But through that process, I can see that actually using this tapered bit is going to be very helpful. So what's going to happen, we're going to attempt to drill down through the top here. Our tapered bit here has got a real sharp cutting edge, and that's going to grab the edge of this inner sleeve. We're going to lubricate with oil the outside here and underneath. Once that tapered bit grabs and gets some good traction, it'll spin this guy loose and work that oil down inside. That's important to get this out. Once we've got this spinning in here, then we can press it out. And also, it's probably going to really be helpful if you do this outside on a warm day. This is one of the last warm days we have here in Las Vegas before the cooler weather sets in. That's why I'm doing this now. It should just keep everything more supple and easy to work with. Oops, spinning already. And I've got the bottom side already lubricated. Just work it really good. Okay, that should do it. Okay, and then next we're going to attempt to push it out using a large socket over the outside diameter of our inner sleeve. And then we're going to use another socket smaller than the size of that. We're going to bear down, see if I can lower this here for you. We're going to bear down on the bench right there, and using a clamp we're going to push that right through. Okay, this is where a warm day really comes in handy. See, I'm just starting to push it down in there. And you might have to just kind of roll it, work it a little bit. Okay, you can see it's starting to go down in there. You need a little bit more. Make some relief cuts. That'd be helpful. Okay, so before we get started here and press these in, let's take a look at a couple of things here that are going to be dire important to make sure that we're successful here. I'm not sure how they did this in the factory. My guess would be some kind of hydraulic press with some kind of jigs or dollies or some kind of something to negate pressures as it's pulling on one side, it's backing up on the other. And we're going to have to try and recreate that without those tools. So my experience with Porsche is that all things Porsche are incredibly tight. So this here would be no exception. My cross member here, this was sandblasted and painted. I'm using a VHT high temperature engine paint. I did that with the old bushings in there. And as you can see here, I have the original paint still in there. So just a word of caution, if you want to do some powder coating, that could change the dynamic of how this is going to go together. You could have enough buildup in here or could make this very difficult to squeeze in there, especially without a press. So that's something to be aware of if you're going to go to powder coating. The other thing is going to be our bushing itself. You can see it's got a tapered inside edge there. And it's got like a flat side here. So when we put this in here, the tapered side is going to be the side we use to start driving this guy down in here. And as you can see, our measurements here on our inner sleeves they're exact. So Buttys Bits did a real good job reproducing those. And my measurements on those are 21.5 millimeters on the neck. The outside is 30.96 or approximately 31 millimeters, and did a real good job machining those to exact standard. This one here, I'm coming up with 18.5 millimeters on the inside hole and 64 millimeters on the outside edge here, which is what we're going to have to squeeze in there. If for some reason your hole size is smaller than that or outside is much bigger than that, I would say within 1.5 to 2 millimeters, you might want to reach out to Simon at Buttys Bits and just let him know before you proceed. Okay, and then how we're going to recreate the forces of a press out of the garage here. So what I've done is I've just gone to the hardware store and picked up an assortment of washers and bolts and various things here, figuring there has to be a combination I can come up with to push and pull at the same time. This is the assortment I came up with. I was successful with that in some combination on our first one. We'll try and recreate that on our second one and see how it goes. Okay, and then next, once we're all cleaned up, all our metal shavings have been cleaned up from the bench, nothing to scratch. What we need to do, we need to press this guy in by hand, but we're going to need some backing around this outer edge. This is a 2-inch PVC coupling, and that seemed to work just right to sit in there and level out so we could bear down in here, because we're going to press this in by hand. I'm going to take some red rubber grease and I'm just going to grease up this leading edge here, nothing on the top because we need traction here. I'm going to grease this edge here. I'm going to try and drive it down in. I don't know if we'll be able to get the camera in there with my palm going, but the motion is to go down at an angle and kind of run it in like a screw, pressing and turning as we're going. And I'm going to be using gloves with a rubber traction to get my grip on the top there. If this is greasy on here, it won't work. So we only need the grease on the bottom half. I'm going to have to push really hard to get that in there. But let's set the camera up and see how that's done. Okay, here we go. Okay, so gloves aren't going to work on this one. So once your hands are sweaty, you're pretty much dead in the water. Everything's got to really be dry, good traction, and really clean on your traction surface. So I'm going to try this with clean bare hand and get some grip on there and hopefully be able to do it without the gloves. Okay, third attempt here. So once your hands get some grease on there, it's pretty much dead. Not much you can do with it. So cleaned up once again. We're going to give it one more try I almost had it last go around. There it is. Got it. And then before we press our inner sleeve in there, I'm just taking a Rolox pad, fine Rolox pad, and just kind of deburring and just slightly smoothing over this outer edge. That way, when we get started with the downward pressure, we don't have any kind of ridge or anything that might be on there to hang up as it's sliding down in there. And then also I'm using just a mineral-based rubber grease for all this. That seems to be working out real good. Okay, let's take a look and see what we're doing here with this contraption before we start tightening it down. So I have grease under the head of the bolt to the washer. I'm lubricated really well on our sleeve going into the bushing and through the center hole of our bushing. Plenty of lubricant in there. As we come around this side, I'm using an 1.5-inch socket that it can draw down into. Also, that'll give us some backing pressure on our rubber mount there. If we didn't have this here, we could end up pushing this rubber mount back out of the cross member there, and that would be miserable because then we'd have to press it back in there. My bolt is a 5-inch by 1/2-inch fine thread, 20 thread, and that's pretty much all we're doing there. We've got one washer there and a little bit of grease under the head. All right, let's tighten that up and see what happens. Just going real slow to get it started, making sure we're not pushing too hard on this because that could push back through there. And the reason I know that is because I did it several times, trying to figure out how to get this guy to go. And real slow. Okay, so we're almost there. It won't quite draw through with that bolt in there. You can see we're almost to the end there, around this side. So we're just going to take a socket and clamp to finish it. So go on here like that, put the clamp on the top, and that should drop down into the socket. Okay, it looks like we got ourselves some transmission mounts. Let's clean that up and we're ready to go. So I would like to give out a really big thanks to Simon at Buttys Bits for manufacturing those up for us. Another quality Porsche parts supplier. I'm also going to put a link to his website in the video description down below. He makes all kinds of things for our cars, our restoration projects, and always coming up with new products all the time. So be sure to check that out. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.